Hi, everybody, and thank you, Bernie, very much for the warm introduction. I would also just like to shout a big thank you to the MDEC guys for organizing not just this event, but also the beta pitch after, and we're very excited to learn more about the ecosystem and find better ways to cross-connect both Germany and Malaysian ecosystem together. So what is betahaus? Betahaus is in a core, it's a co-working space. So we sort of have a claim to our name that we went from a co-working space to an innovation hub, which I think is just a line of buzzwords in a line. But basically, we have a very strong vision that after 10 years of operating, we're still very strongly standing behind it, and that is empowering entrepreneurship by building vital communities. Now, I know there's also a lot of buzzwords in that claim, but I'll just quickly explain it. So betahaus was founded in 2009 in Berlin. We originally had 6 co-founders, and they had one idea in mind. There were already quite a few office share spaces as like a little bit more affordable real estate where you're able to acquire a desk and get access to your Wi-Fi in Berlin. However, none of them was focusing on connecting the people they have inside, so on exchange of this value. So betahaus is known as a pioneer in Europe for building a community-driven space, and that's basically what we mean by building vital communities. So one thing is to have a physical space and to put different people in it or to attract different people in it. But another thing is to try to help them to engage, to exchange value between each other. Being a founder became a very big trend in Berlin. So every second person that you meet has a business on a side or as a primarily thing. So it's a very, very popular thing. So people in general, what sort of a conclusion from here is, are striving towards creativity, also toward building something. They're very active. And also the city gives the landscape and the affordability in order to be able to do that. Cool. Okay, now I shared a lot of fun stories, a lot of art, creative, and cool claims, but here are some of the numbers about Berlin. So first thing, 6 million inhabitants. This is the metropolitan area, not just the city itself. But what's interesting that out of the 6 million, 54% of them are below the age of 45. So it's a very, very young city. Some sort of numbers in terms of funding. So Berlin is #1 in Germany in terms of funding taking place, and it's marked as third, or was marked in 2017, as the third in Europe. What's interesting that it's still up to date, it's #7 on the global startup ecosystem ranking, and also the number of companies that are being founded in Berlin. So we have over 180,000 companies being founded. And this is actually one of my favorite ones. We have over 120 corporate labs. Are you familiar with corporate labs or innovations? I see some heads nodding, some no. Cool. So I'll actually stop there for a second and explain that. So in Germany, we have a lot of corporate companies. But most of them, if not all of them, do not have headquarters in Berlin, even though Berlin is the capital of Germany. So the distribution of HQs is mainly in the southern part of Germany. So if you imagine Germany on a map, Berlin is on the top right corner, and the south part is mainly where the corporates' homes are. So think about Audis, think about Volkswagens. They're all neighbors there in the south part. But what's interesting is that all of them opened multiple different labs or accelerators or incubators or any types of hubs or sponsored opening of a hub in Berlin in order to get access to the creative people. We'll dig a little bit deeper in the second part of the workshop on that topic. Cool, but to go further, we have over 185 nationalities in Berlin. So I have to say I was also very pleasantly surprised. So it's my first time in Malaysia. And I just landed on Monday evening, and my first realization was everybody speaks English, everything is in English, and it's so easy to get around. But my second realization was, as I arrived quite late, I had quite a long travel, so I was a little bit tired and dozy. But I walked around the street and everything was buzzing, and I realized that I see so many different ethnicities and nationalities around me combined in one, which I think is amazing. It a little bit reminded me of Berlin. We have a similar situation happening there. Also, what's interesting, so obviously with all of the different nationalities background, so I'm personally half Serbian, half Slovenian, so I'm not German. Over 70% of people speak 2 languages or more. Obviously, English being usually the first, or the second, or the first language. And yeah, that actually brings me then to the last 2 points. So in Berlin today, we have over 200 co-working spaces. That's a lot of spaces. Berlin is not such a big city at the end if you compare it to a couple of other capitals, let's say in US. But still, we have over 200 co-working spaces. And they're expecting this number to double in next 10 years. I'm really curious to where they're going to find the spaces. And of course, coming back to also what's in common here in Malaysia, the unofficial language in the startups is English. So all the startup communities are English speaking. 90% of the events are in English. And it's quite easy to get around Berlin without speaking German, which I don't think it's a really great thing when you're trying to incorporate in a certain culture, like in German in general. But it is an advantage if you're trying to just start something or get to know a certain market. So I created a slide with some of our successful alumni. So GoEuro is a platform that connects different transportation options from flight to train to bus to car share, I think also to taxis at the end, that get you from point A to point B of your travel, and you can seamlessly just book your travel in one. They're actually currently expanding to US market, and they have fully conquered European market. Then maybe another one to mention, yeah, Louvre is a cool one. So Louvre created a camera stabilizer that, interestingly enough, was actually the first prototype was 3D printed in betahaus over 8 years ago when we had one of the first maker bots, you know, the ones that were self-built ones? We actually have the number 7 maker bot of the self-built ones. I think that's almost vintage up to go to a museum. So the first Louvre was built on that maker bot. And today they're actually also present already in US and European market. And they were known as one of the unicorns of Kickstarter in the amount of raised through their campaign. So a few others, so perhaps Bragi is actually a hardware solution. So it's actually a device you're able to put on your, how you actually call this part? So in here, almost on your forehead, that vibrates and basically allows you to hear the sound. So it's a very, very interesting solution. I think they're actually now in China, as well as together with Soundbrenner, which is a solution for motorcyclers' sound system inside the helmet. So you can clearly see that Berlin has brought some of the biggest unicorns on the global level. Do you guys know SoundCloud? So SoundCloud is from Berlin. However, there also are other successfully growing ecosystems in Germany, sorry. And not just in terms of startups, but also in terms of capital. So this graph mainly shows in terms of capital investment raised and some of the unicorns. So we can see that Hamburg is more or less together with Munich running on the 2nd place as the size of the ecosystem itself. And what's interesting is that actually Hamburg is setting up to be a fintech capital in Europe, to attract mostly fintech startups. We actually also just opened the fintech space in Hamburg to facilitate only startups, not allowing the corporates inside. Then Munich, of course, with its epicenter. So just to understand for maybe the ones who are not aware, when I was mentioning before that mainly corporates have their headquarters in the south, that's around Munich. So all of the big boys are mainly around Munich. There's also quite some epicenter around Frankfurt and Hamburg, but predominantly we have Munich area, which is the home of Audis and Volkswagens and Siemenses and others. So Munich also obviously has a very big need for solutions, as well as obviously has quite some money to share or to spend in the innovation development. So they're also developing into a big ecosystem, but as you can see, compared to Berlin, they're still quite behind. So another interesting graph or piece of information that I actually found was a ratio between B2b and B2c startups in Germany, or between Munich, Hamburg, and Berlin. And I'll be honest, I was actually surprised when I saw it, because a couple of years ago, Berlin graph looked different. There was actually more B2C startups than B2B. And I already see the shift in a change. So what's interesting that Germany predominantly has B2B startups. And I think as we move forward with the story, it's going to be very clear on why does it attract so many B2B startups. Over 99% of German companies are actually SMEs, or in Germany we call them the Mittelstand, and majority of them are still family-owned businesses after more than 50 years or 100 years or even 150 years of existence. Now that's an interesting fact. So there's a very, very long history and quite of a power in their own hands as family-owned businesses still in the holding. So Germany has 2.4 trillion GDP. Also what's interesting is the 15 out of 189 countries according to market size. And also it's labeled as the 4th strongest economy in the world. Cool, but coming back to the corporates. So the corporate companies started knocking at our doors quite vividly around, I think, 8 or 7 years ago. And originally it started with marketing budgets and wanting to place their logo on some of our events or to tie them together with some of our community members. And at the time, like, we also didn't really have a service provider in order to support them more than just to get some sponsorship for them and put their logo in place. Also, it was unclear at the time of what they actually can provide to the startups. There was actually more of a mindset, corporates are bad and startups are good. So, but around 5 years ago, that started changing quite rapidly. So the corporate companies realized there's much more they can benefit from startups and from this ecosystem of freelancer and top talent than just placing their logo and hoping that eventually they're going to become one of their customers. So they started really focusing on first changing their own internal structures. So we all know about the design thinking methodology. So I think this workshop has been done with the same companies over and over again. A lot of times successful, but sadly also a lot of times unsuccessful. So there's this wave, 5 years ago, there was this wave of wanting to adopt entrepreneurship or sort of internal change of motivation and mindset in their employees. And slowly also trying to collaborate with external solution providers such as startups or external building teams as R&Ds in order to be more innovative in their product range, in their business model, in the way they work, in basically all areas of a structure. And that's still vividly happening today. And we, for those reasons of them knocking at our doors and realizing the opportunity, not just for something we can do for corporate companies, but actually the opportunity they're bringing to our startups. So what are they actually giving? A lot of startups need the support of the infrastructure. So corporate companies obviously have use cases and infrastructure that the startups are able, for example, on early stage, to use as testing ground and as a pilot, which gains a lot of very important knowledge for that startup to keep developing further. Obviously, in the long run, becoming in a business relationship with a corporate company can be pretty damn cool for a B2B startup. And of course, the last thing, they're lacking feedback and peer group access. So they try to access communities in order to gain that, in order to actually understand what should they be building to also adopt their products or to change their mindset or how they're being understood. Yeah, I'm also very happy to have MDEC on the map. I'm very excited to build that. But for example, perhaps an interesting program to share as also one of the inroads on how are you able to access the German market as a company. So for example, the Australian landing pad has been operating their Berlin landing pad now for 2 years from betahaus. And they're basically using our know-how and some of our services to help their companies get smarter and get all the support needed in order to expand to Germany. So this goes from education to getting to know how to set up your own company, to getting access to consultants, to also getting access to potential new clients and to communities and peer groups that you require. So I just got, I think, 1 or 2 more slides, and then I actually want to hear it from you. So I just tried to summarize some of the key things, some that I already mentioned, or some that indirectly I tried to explain about. So how to do Germany, or how to successfully land in Germany. Be punctual. They're very punctual and very efficient. If you can be ahead of time, be ahead of time. It's not a joke. Come prepared and share your slides in advance. If you're expecting that the first meeting, especially either with, let's say, somebody from the investors or the VC funds or somebody from the corporates, if you're expecting them that the first time you're going to meet, you're just going to chit-chat, dream about it. They want to see it all in the first 5 minutes, preferably. They don't wait. They first do, give me all the insights, give me all the details, and then if we still have time, let's grab coffee or lunch. So it's very efficient. It almost sounds cold at the beginning, but it's not. It's just the way that they do business. Have LinkedIn. Networking is everything. Also, it's common to source or search for people on LinkedIn, connect with them, and actually also reach out. So to be very proactive in terms of growing your network, whether that's for potential business development or also just for collaborative support, have LinkedIn. Germans also use Xing, but it's slowly dying out, so I would definitely recommend LinkedIn. Share your idea and acquire feedback. Don't hide in the basement. A lot of companies in Korea, actually, because we hosted a lot of programs, so a lot of companies from Korea that were entering for some of the landing pads for us to Germany, the first thing that they would say, oh, I'm not showing you my technology, my patent is still pending. And then they would ask us, but why cannot I get a meeting with any of the corporates? And I'm like, that's why. Because they don't care about your patent. Nobody does. Obviously, you should, especially if you're having hardware solutions, you should apply for it. But everybody knows it's going to take years. And everybody knows that if somebody still wants to copy you, they can still copy you. But if you're talking, especially to German corporates, and if they decided to devote half an hour, 1 hour of your time, they want to hear about it immediately. Share it. Do not hide it. If you're a B2C and you're building something for a consumer, and you're not sharing with your consumer of what that is, what do you think you're building it for? Share it. If people are going to copy you, they can. Ideas are cheap. What matters is the way you're going to execute it and the way you're going to be faster than them or better than them or have better engagement with them. So don't hide, share it, acquire feedback. This is actually my favorite one. Be bold, but not ignorant or arrogant. And I know it's a little bit more crossing to the cultural, almost emotional or personal preferences. But if you want to be heard, so one way that I loved actually explaining, especially to our teams coming from different cultures. So I'm originally Serbian and Slovenian. And as a Serbian, what's culturally common for us, that we're extremely loud. In a sense, we speak like, I'm actually toning it down now because we agreed to use the microphone for the video. Otherwise, I tend to shout, and I hope I haven't done any of that. But for example, I had to learn in Germany to still have this confidential presence, but to don't shout at people. And for a lot of other cultures, it's common the other way around. So for example, if you're speaking very quietly, very softly, and you're trying to engage with somebody and get them to listen to you, they're not going to listen to you in Germany if you don't have some confidence and some boldness within it. However, if you're cocky and arrogant, which a lot of times happen to us with US founders, where in US this works, you know, the way you speak, everything's awesome, everything's great, we're the best one, we're great. You also are going to hit and miss. So sort of the balance in between, so be bold but not arrogant, and of course never be ignorant to whoever you're speaking to or to whoever you're trying to achieve. So I already mentioned this, but first do the meeting, only later engage with small talks. So they're very efficient. They first want to get the work done, and then they're very happy to grab a beer. Even if it's the middle of the day, anybody in Germany will have a beer with you. And also this one actually quite closely ties to it. So answer directly and be ready to present in short but straight to the point. I'm a little bit tying it to the loop to my 6-word sentence. I know that my 6-word sentence is quite holistic. You can make that very professional, so you can really change that according to your needs, but you need to have that ready at all time. So another thing in Berlin that perhaps I haven't mentioned, with it plus 200 co-working spaces and plus 120 spin-off labs and God knows how many other communities or spaces, there's so many events that you can literally just spend your whole time, like transfer yourself into 5 different people and still spend your whole time just being in events. And obviously not all of them are important, but quite a lot of them actually are. People do still go to events, and you're still able to network and to meet very interesting and very high-level stakeholders that could be relevant to you. However, you need to attract them and engage them in a very short conversation. So it's very speedy. So you need to have that ready. So think about your 6-word sentences or the way that you want to present your company. Think about your elevator pitch. Be very straight to the point and answer any questions directly. If you're trying to like dodgy the way out of it. Like, I don't want to disclose that part. Here's an NDA. Germans are going to be like, yeah, no, bye. Gone. So before I sort of start hearing from you guys, I just wanted to share, I hope the link actually works. It's a link to a Google Doc, so a Google folder, because yesterday, also speaking to Serena and Parni, I realized that we have a really nice PDF made by one of our mentors, basically for foreign companies that are trying to enter to Germany. So I'll be honest, the information you're going to find there is all Googleable. However, it saves you time because it's all condensed in one. So everything from a corporate landscape to investment infrastructure to how do you engage, how do you do business, cultural etiquettes, etc., blah, blah, blah. So please feel free to save the link and access it. Cool. So thank you again.